5 sons, 5 financial capitals, no crowns, no flags, no armies. Yet by the early 19th century, one family quietly moved more money than most European nations combined. While emperors ruled with cannons, this family ruled with information. While generals fought over land, they fought over time. Because in finance, the first to know always wins. Napoleon was rising, Europe was burning. Empires were bleeding gold at a rate no treasury could sustain. Every army needed weapons. Every weapon needed steel. Every shipment needed insurance. And every war needed one thing above all else: money, not coins, not treasure chests, but credit, invisible, silent, deadly. And somewhere between London, Paris, Frankfurt, Vienna, and Naples, a private courier network was moving faster than kings, faster than governments, faster than armies. Messages arrived before cannons cooled. Prices shifted before the public even knew a war had begun. And once again, the same name kept appearing behind every major transaction. Behind bonds, behind war loans, behind central banks, behind national debt. No royal decree created their power. No constitution defined it. No flag represented it. Yet governments kneeled to it. For over 200 years, rumors followed this family like shadows. Some called them financial geniuses. Some called them architects of modern banking. Others whispered darker theories. But one fact remains indisputable. The modern global financial system was built on their blueprint. This is not a story about secret rulers of the world. It is something far more unsettling. This is the story of how money itself became the new throne, and how one family was the first to sit on it. Welcome to Financial Chronicle. This is how one family quietly controlled Europe's money. Frankfurt, 1744. Inside the city's Jewish ghetto, where opportunity was limited by law and guarded by walls, a small coin shop displayed a simple red shield above its door. That symbol would give birth to one of the most powerful financial dynasties in human history. Inside, a young dealer named Meyer Amschel Rothschild traded rare coins, foreign currencies, and antiquities. But Meyer wasn't just a merchant. He was a network builder. He understood what others ignored. Information traveled faster than gold. By serving wealthy German princes, especially the ambitious William IX of Hesse, Meyer gained access not only to capital, but to political intelligence. He learned which wars were coming before the publics did. He learned which currencies would collapse before markets reacted. Instead of hoarding gold, he did something revolutionary. He moved it. Quietly. Across borders, across wars. And when restrictions tightened against Jews across Europe, Meyer made a decision no banker had ever made before. He would not build one bank. He would build 5. Meyer's strategy was simple but radical. Each of his 5 sons would become a financial outpost in a different power center of Europe. Amschel stayed in Frankfurt. Nathan was sent to London, James to Paris, Salomon to Vienna, Karl to Naples. 5 brothers, 5 empires. One invisible balance sheet. Each branch operated independently, yet shared complete financial intelligence. This created the first true international private banking network. While traditional banks were trapped within national borders, the Rothschilds moved freely between currencies, monarchies, and conflicts. If France collapsed, London absorbed the shock. If Austria defaulted, Frankfurt rebalanced the risk. This was diversification on a scale the world had never seen. For the first time in history, a family could finance wars on one side and collect interest on the other. In the 1800s, news traveled on horseback and by ship. Governments waited weeks for battlefield updates. Markets waited even longer. The Rothschilds did not. They built one of the fastest private courier networks in Europe. Pigeons, riders, ships, coded letters, everything optimized for speed. Because in financial warfare, whoever knows first decides last. A government might believe its bonds were safe. A general might believe victory was near. A king might believe no one else knew his treasury was empty. But inside Rothschild offices across Europe, the truth arrived early. And once truth arrives early, profit follows. This is how money learned to move faster than armies. War is a tragedy for humanity, but for finance, it is history's most reliable business model. In the early 19th century, Europe was permanently on fire. Armies marched, cities burned, and treasuries emptied at a terrifying speed. But one reality never changed. Wars could not exist without money. Weapons required steel. Steel required coal. Coal required transport. Transport required insurance. And all of it required credit. This was the moment when the Rothschild network became something far more than simple bankers. Kings raised armies, but bankers raised debt. A nation could win a battle, but it could never defeat interest. Every new war pushed governments deeper into dependency. Taxes could not keep up. Gold reserves vanished, and once a state became addicted to borrowing, control quietly shifted away from the throne. The Rothschilds no longer followed wars, they powered them. And war, for the first time in history, became a permanent financial engine. 1815. The fate of Europe balanced on one man, Napoleon Bonaparte. If he won, the continent would be rebuilt in his image. If he lost, an entire imperial era would collapse. At Battle of Waterloo, cannons thundered across muddy fields. Thousands died. But in London, another battle was already underway, the battle for information. Official news would take days to reach the markets. Rothschild couriers delivered it in hours. Nathan Rothschild received confirmation of Napoleon's defeat before the British government. In public, he began selling British government bonds. Panic exploded. Investors believed Britain had lost. Prices collapsed. And at the very bottom, Nathan quietly began buying everything back. When victory was officially announced, prices soared. Fortunes were transferred in a single afternoon. From that moment forward, the world learned a brutal truth. The real battlefield is not where soldiers fight. It is where information arrives first. London was transforming into the financial heart of the world. Industry exploded. Trade expanded across oceans, and at the core of it all stood one man, Nathan Rothschild. The London branch was not simply a bank. It became the shadow treasury of the British Empire. Britain financed its wars not with stored gold, but with borrowed confidence. Fleets, armies, colonies, all fueled by credit engineered through private banking. Power was no longer measured by how much gold a nation owned. It was measured by how cheaply a nation could borrow. Nathan understood this before any government. Gold slowed systems down. Debt made them infinite. And London quietly became the control room of global finance. For centuries, kings ruled money. Now money ruled kings. Austria, Prussia, France, Britain, every empire eventually reached the same point. Their treasuries were empty, and taxes could no longer sustain wars. Borrowing became unavoidable, and borrowing had only one address. The same monarchs who once commanded armies now negotiated interest rates. Thrones survived not by conquest, but by creditworthiness. Political power slowly transformed into financial dependency. Those who secured low-interest loans continued ruling. Those who defaulted collapsed without a single foreign invasion. The modern empire had been born. the empire of debt. This empire had no borders, no anthem, no army. Yet it reached deeper than any kingdom in history. The Rothschild system did not expand through conquest. It expanded through contracts. Losses in one nation were balanced by profits in another. Wars financed in one decade were repaid with interest in the next. Governments could not fully comprehend this system because no government could operate simultaneously in 5 nations. But the Rothschild network did exactly that. Here, the most dangerous form of power was born, power without responsibility. There were no elections, no public debates, no visible authority, only agreements, only debt, only silent gold shipments crossing borders at night. And now the world understood. In the modern age, empires do not march. They calculate. For most of human history, empires expanded with armies. Territory was taken with blood. Borders were drawn with swords. But the 19th century introduced a quieter weapon: debt. A nation no longer needed to be invaded to be controlled. It only needed to borrow more than it could repay. Once interest consumed tax revenues, something terrifying happened. Political decisions were no longer made by parliaments. They were dictated by credit conditions. Raise taxes or lose funding, cut spending or default, follow financial discipline or collapse, all without a single enemy soldier crossing the border. This was more efficient than war, cheaper than conquest, and far harder to resist. The Rothschild system did not create this model, but it proved how devastatingly effective it could be. Empires no longer fell only through defeat. They fell through balance sheets, and the world would never return to the age of purely military power again. As governments grew addicted to borrowing, they needed a system to manage this new reality. This is where the modern central bank model began to take shape. Institutions like the Bank of England became the interface between governments, markets, and private capital. They stabilized currencies. They managed national debt. They controlled interest rates. But they also introduced something revolutionary. Money could now be created through confidence, not metal. No longer limited by physical gold reserves, nations could expand their financial systems through bonds, notes, and credit ratios. This blueprint would later evolve into the global monetary architecture that governs the world today. Private capital, public debt, and institutional confidence merged into a single machine. And once debt became national policy, banking ceased to be a profession. It became infrastructure of power. Financial expansion always carries one hidden consequence: collapse. Throughout the 19th century, Europe experienced repeated market crashes. Commodity bubbles burst. Banks failed. Entire fortunes vanished overnight. But while countless financial institutions disappeared, the Rothschild network survived. Why? Because their system was built on geographic risk dispersion. If Vienna crashed, London absorbed the shock. If Paris collapsed, Frankfurt stabilized operations. They never bet everything on one country. They never trusted one currency. They never depended on one government. This was financial evolution in real time. Everything else was vulnerable. Their system was anti-fragile, and in every collapse, while others lost everything, they gained something more valuable than profit: position. Over time, the Rothschild name stopped being associated with individual bankers. It became something larger: a system, a symbol, an institution. Leadership passed through generations. Members died. Branches restructured. But the network itself never stopped functioning. This is the critical transformation point. When power becomes institutional, it becomes nearly immortal. No single person controlled the machine anymore. The machine controlled itself. This transition is what every financial dynasty dreams of, to evolve beyond bloodlines into permanent structure. By the late 1800s, the Rothschild system had achieved exactly that. They were no longer a family of bankers. They were a financial architecture embedded into Europe itself. The family never ruled a nation. They never won an election. They never sat on a throne. Yet their financial support determined which governments survived wars, which collapsed into bankruptcy, and which rose as new global powers. This is the most unsettling form of control. Power without visibility. The public voted. Parliaments debated. Kings declared policies. But behind every national decision stood a financial prerequisite. Can this government still borrow? If the answer was no, the government fell. Without revolution, without invasion, without a single shot fired. The age of visible rulers had ended. The age of financial gatekeepers had begun. As the Rothschild network expanded, a shadow followed it. With invisible power comes invisible fear. Across Europe, rumors spread faster than facts. Some called them financial geniuses. Others called them the hidden hand behind empires. Their influence became so vast that people struggled to understand where truth ended and myth began. This is the danger of unseen power. When authority is visible, it can be challenged. When it is hidden in balance sheets and contracts, it becomes untouchable. Governments trusted them with national survival. Markets followed their movements without understanding them. The public feared what it could not see. The Rothschilds neither confirmed nor denied the myths. They did not need to. In finance, perception itself is leverage. And by the late 19th century, their greatest asset was no longer gold. It was belief. Behind every currency, every bond, every empire stood one silent foundation: gold. While armies guarded borders, the Rothschild network guarded vault movements. Gold crossed seas in locked shipments. It moved through cities under armed escort. It flowed between nations like blood through arteries. This was not random transport. It was precision logistics of global power. Wars were decided not only by who had the larger army, but by who could move metal faster across continents. And few networks on Earth matched the speed and security of the Rothschild system. Entire national treasuries depended on these silent highways. A delayed shipment could collapse a currency. A lost convoy could trigger a panic. Gold no longer belonged to kings. Kings depended on gold. And gold moved where private contracts commanded it. Empires project strength until the moment their treasuries run dry. This is when pride collapses. Throughout the 19th century, defeated and exhausted nations approached private finance with a single question: how much can we borrow? Once an empire becomes a borrower, its future becomes predictable. Interest rates reveal risk. Loan conditions reveal control. Repayment schedules reveal submission. A nation in debt does not plan decades ahead. It plans until its next installment. This is the moment where political independence quietly ends. Not through invasion, not through revolution, but through financial dependency. And once debt replaced conquest as the weapon of control, history entered a new age. By the late 1800s, the financial world no longer resembled the age of coins and vaults. Stock exchanges expanded. Bond markets exploded. Paper replaced metal. Money became abstract. This is where the final transformation occurred. Finance separated from physical reality. Currencies were no longer tied directly to gold. National economies became interconnected through credit chains. A crisis in one market could now ripple across continents within days. The training ground of this system was 19th century Europe. Its full force would only be seen in the century that followed. By the end of the 19th century, the Rothschild name no longer belonged to Europe alone. It belonged to the world. Their banking houses operated across borders. Their influence reached into governments, industries, and central financial institutions. Their system had outgrown the family itself. What had begun as a single coin shop in a restricted ghetto had become a global financial architecture. Not built with armies, not sustained with propaganda, but constructed through contracts, confidence, and debt. And now the blueprint of modern finance stood complete. They never placed a crown on their heads. They never commanded armies from marble halls. They never ruled nations by decree. Yet their influence reshaped borders, determined war outcomes, and dictated economic survival. This is the most dangerous form of authority, power without a throne. When kings ruled, power was visible. When presidents ruled, power was debated. But when money ruled, power became silent. Governments may change every few years. Administrations may rise and fall. Revolutions may burn streets and erase flags. But debt remains. A nation burdened by interest does not govern freely. Its priorities are preset by financial survival. This is the final evolution of control. Not command, not conquest, but dependency. And once power becomes embedded in systems rather than people, it becomes almost impossible to remove. Because systems do not retire. They do not feel fear. They do not surrender. They simply continue. 2 centuries have passed since a small banking network began changing the structure of money itself. But the formula has never disappeared. Information still moves faster than armies. Credit still rules over currencies. Debt still shapes political decisions. And confidence still creates money from nothing. Modern central banks now perform on a global scale what private networks once pioneered across Europe. Digital transactions replaced gold convoys. Algorithms replaced couriers. Markets replaced battlefields. But the architecture remains unchanged. The same financial mathematics still controls the world. Speed, debt, confidence, information. This is not history repeating itself. This is history continuing. Empires once rose with swords, then with cannons, then with steel. But the modern world rose with debt. Long before global institutions, before central banks dominated economies, before markets became digital, one family proved a terrifying truth. Money is not just a tool of power. Money is power itself. Today, wars still begin with weapons, but they are sustained with loans. Nations still rise with political promises, but they fall through financial collapse. The battlefield has changed, but the equation has not. And as long as the world runs on credit, the mathematics of power will never disappear.